Hey fly tiers, Darren here. Welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. Today we're going to be tying an old pattern. This one's called the Pass Lake Special. It originates sometime in the 1930s and is said to be first tied by Reverend E. Stubenvoll from Clintonville, Wisconsin. And it was tied to target some of the large trout of Pass Lake in Ontario, Canada. Now, over the years, there's been quite a few different variations of this pattern. You'll probably see different variations of the fly tied with golden pheasant tippet in the tail rather than the mallard flank. There's also different wing variations and different variations tied to target specific species, such as a panfish specific fly or an Atlantic salmon fly. So make sure that you leave a comment down below and I'll enter you into the next draw for flies and decals. Let's have a look at the pattern and get started. Alright, let's get a fresh hook in the vise. We're going to be using a Mustad 3 906B and we're going to be using a number 10 today. And we're typically going to be tying this between sizes 8 down to around 16 or so. There you go, there's the Mustad pack that I'm using. For thread, we're going to be using a UTC thread. I'm going to be using 70 denier, and we're going to be tying this in black. I have seen variations of this tied with a red thread that looks really great as well. Alright, so we'll just tie our thread on a little bit behind the eye, and we're going to take a mallard flank or a body feather, and we're going to peel off probably somewhere between 10 and 12 fibers. You just want to kind of line up the tips of those. Once you have the tips lined up, you can grasp them and then pull them off the stem. That way you'll have the tips more or less aligned, and you can just wet those a little bit just to keep them tame. And I like to tie this a little bit shorter than the total length of the hook shank. We'll tie the hackle mallard fibers just on top of the hook shank with a few wraps down into just past the hook point. We'll clip off the excess. So no rib on this fly, but there are some variations that call for it. And I should also mention in the tail, sometimes you'll see this tied with golden pheasant tippet, which looks pretty cool as well. But this is more or less the original pattern here we're tying today. So now we're going to grab some black chenille. This is a small chenille, and we're just going to tie that in along the top of the hook shank down to the base of the tail. And then we're going to wrap this up to where we have our thread. So I've left my thread about an eye width behind the eye, and just so we have some room to build up a nice tapered head and facilitate tying in our wing at the front. So we'll just wind that chenille back. You might also see this pattern tied with peacock herl instead of the chenille, which again, another great variation of this fly. But as you can see, there's quite a number of different variations, and some of them are quite a bit different than the original. The only real common thread among most of them is just the hackle, which brings us to our next material. We're going to tie in traditionally it's a Coachman Brown hen hackle. I don't have any of that, so what I'm actually going to be using is a softer rooster cape, and it's a barred grizzly. So we just want to kind of measure that so that we don't have it too long, and we'll start from there. I'll peel the fibers back from there. And then we'll tie that in and form our collar. So we'll just tie that in by the base, just right at the point where our chenille ends. You want to just try not to build up too much bulk right behind the eye. We'll clip off that stem after we've folded it back and secured it. And then we're going to wind that hackle backwards. So when I tied that in, I tied it with the concave side facing back and the shiny side facing out. So we'll add a couple wraps. And you can see I pull all the fibers back and then make sure that they get caught underneath so that you have a nice profile of all the hackle fibers laying back. We'll fold the stem back after we've tied it down and clean that up a touch. And then you can just pluck that extra hackle off. So next we're going to take a little bit of white calf tail, and I've used a couple different materials for this. One of the materials I really like to use is fox fur. It's a little more dense than the calf tail, a little bit easier to work with sometimes. It compresses a little bit more so you can tie it down a little bit more securely. So for these calf tail fibers, I'm just pulling out the longest ones, and then I'm going to kind of hand stack these so that they're all approximately the same length. I don't want them exactly the same length. You could use a hair stacker to line them up perfectly, but I find that kind of takes away from the aesthetics a little bit and takes away from the natural look of the fly when you've got a clean, sharp edge there. So we'll just trim off those butts once we got kind of our length figured out. And I just want this to extend a little bit past the bend of the hook. We'll tie down those butt ends right on top of the hook shank. And then we'll try and clip away a few of those butts before we start to tie them down. And then we'll just add some wraps to just kind of conceal the rest of those butts there. You might need to trim those down a little bit more. But as you can see, there's quite a number of variations. And again, if you had used a red thread, you'd have a red head on this fly as well. So just with the two different tail materials, two different body materials, you can actually change the color of the wing in there as well. I've seen versions with the white wing like this, also versions with either an orange or a yellow or brown wing. Looks pretty cool. And like I said, the only thing that really doesn't change is the color of the hackle. So we've just added a whip finish, and we're just going to add a coat of bone dry just to kind of secure this. And one trick that I have done in the past, if you do find that your wing flares up a little high, a little higher than you'd like, what you can do is you can pull that wing down and add a small dab of bone dry just to kind of keep it tamed a little bit more. But this is a great fly for trout. I've seen it tied in some larger versions for Atlantic salmon, but give this one a try. Hey fly tiers, thanks for stopping by and checking out my fly tying videos. If you enjoyed the video and want to show your support, hit the thumbs up and share it to your social networks. I hope you consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, be sure to hit the bell icon to get notifications on my latest fly patterns, tips, and reviews. If you have a question or comment, leave a message below. You'll also be entered into the next draw for some of the flies I tie and a few stickers. Until next time, this is Darren saying, keep a hook in your vise. Cheers.